Watching bad movies is a popular pastime for a lot of people. There are awards, critics, and friend simulators just devoted to finding and watching the most terrible films imaginable. These are movies where you can tell that the actors were recruited from a parking lot, the special effects budget was a gift card, and the director never worked a day in his life sober. Generally, the weirder and more incompetent, the better. Some of the filmmakers behind these cinematic atrocities even become notorious themselves. Infamously bad directors like Tommy Wiseau, J.J. Abrams, and Neil Breen have legions of fans obsessed with their work. While the competition for the title of worst director ever is fierce, you're more than likely to come across Ed Wood as the answer. Edward D. Wood Jr. was an American B-movie director who made crime, horror, sci-fi, and later on hardcore amorous films between the 1950s and 70s. He had no regard for good taste or proper technique, but I don't think it's fair to consider him the worst director ever. In fact, it's worthwhile to consider how this conception of Wood came about in the first place. How did his name become synonymous with terrible filmmaking? When did he get this reputation? And who decreed that Wood was the worst of the worst? Now, if you've never seen one of Wood's movies, you're probably at least familiar with the Tim Burton biopic about him. It's a fantastic tribute, and while not that historically accurate, captures the gist of his legend. Burton depicts Wood in the 1950s as a sincere discount auteur who likes dressing up as a woman and has no idea how bad his movies are. His acting friends include an aging, drug-addicted Bela Lugosi, a 400-pound Swedish wrestler and vampire TV hostess, and a psychic who sleeps in a coffin. Banding with these fellow eccentrics, Wood doesn't let a lack of money, special effects, or talent get in his way. He's determined to make his movies and no one else's. Burton's biopic chronicles the making of two of his most beloved pictures. Glen or Glenda, which Wood shot in 4 days, is a 1953 docudrama about an agonized cross-dresser played by the director himself. Then there's Plan 9 from Outer Space, a frequent nomination for the worst movie of all time. This accidental absurdist dream world concerns aliens who hatch an intergalactic plot to resurrect dead humans to destroy the Earth, so that humans can't make a weapon out of the sun, which would lead to the destruction of the universe, I guess, but the zombies are completely useless and nobody even knows they exist, and honestly, I can't explain the intricacies of the plot. What I can tell you is that Plan 9 is the perfect example of how not to make a movie. The dialogue is often awkward or nonsensical, as in this argument here.
Can you see or measure an atom? Yet you can explode one. A ray of sunlight is made up of many atoms.
So what if we do develop this solar bomb? We'd be even a stronger nation than now.
Stronger. You see? You see? Your stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
That's all I'm taking from you.
Get back here, you fool! Let him finish.
The characters are so illogical that they very well might have those brain parasites people get from cats. There's pure unadulterated stock footage, and the special effects are so shoddy that people thought for the longest time that the UFOs were hubcaps or paper plates. Then there's the total disregard for time, space, and logic. Shots in the same scene will bounce back and forth between daylight and nighttime. Airline pilots sit on boxes and fly planes without using their hands. UFOs shoot laser beams that can destroy clothes and skin, but not capes or bones. Props get damaged and restored moments later while objects disappear and reappear, as in this chase scene, where the actress runs through the cemetery barefoot but is found with shoes a minute later. Ed Wood just didn't care. He added old footage of Bela Lugosi to the movie, even though Lugosi was already dead and the scenes were completely unrelated. Wood then replaced Lugosi's character with his wife's chiropractor, despite the two looking nothing alike. Overall, it's an absolute mess of a movie and utterly fascinating for all the rules it breaks, defies, and ignores. If an experimental director like David Lynch made this movie, it would grace every critic's personal top 10 list.
Elaborate on that.
No, I won't.
Plane 9 from Outer Space has a special place in my heart because it was one of the first so bad it's good movies I'd ever seen. I thought it was strange and hilarious, but I was also fascinated by the oddball who directed, produced, and wrote it. I watched the Tim Burton biopic and further fell in love with the guy. Or at least the legend of him. When I got older, I picked up the biography that inspired Burton's movie, Rudolph Gray's The Nightmare of Ecstasy, and was shocked that Wood's life wasn't nearly as quirky as Disney made it out to be. Wood was an intelligent person but had some serious mental baggage. While the movie ends with Wood getting married to his wife, Kathy O'Hara, the real Wood spent his final years living in poverty, drinking himself to death and trading verbal and physical blows with his wife. After turning to hardcore amorous films in the 1960s, Wood wrote trashy novels and barely scraped by because he blew his money on alcohol, or would get mugged on his way to the liquor store, or would sell his typewriters for booze money. When Wood had a heart attack in 1978, his wife heard him yell that he couldn't breathe and she ignored him. Wood died practically unknown. One of his coworkers from a time at an adult magazine would later remark that he didn't even know that Wood made movies. It's a sad twist of fate that Wood never actually got to experience the rediscovery of his work. When his movies were first released in the 50s, nobody paid them much mind. They were cheap B-movies after all, put on double bills that catered to kids and teenagers. Later in the decade and into the 1960s, cheap horror movies like Wood's were packaged and sold to TV stations that aired them with campy hosts like Plan 9's own Vampira and New York City's The Cool Ghoul. The latter hosted Chiller Theater on Channel 11, WPIX, which was known to air Plan 9 and Bride of the Monster. The show's opening would even use a clip from Plan 9 during a montage sequence. These shows were probably instrumental in setting up Wood's legacy. Around the same time, horror magazines like Famous Monsters of Filmland were already mocking Wood's work. In an article by film critic Joe Blevins, Rudolph Gray's noted as dating Wood's reputation as the worst director of all time back to these magazines and fandoms. By the 1970s, the kids who grew up watching shows like Chiller Theater were now adults going to so-called midnight movies. These were exploitative, unconventional, or just plain weird movies that were played at art house and urban theaters. New releases like El Topo and Pink Flamingos did well on this circuit, but it also led people to rediscover older films, such as Reefer Madness and Wood's own Glen or Glenda. The interest in bad and unusual movies was enough that in 1978, Michael and Harry Medved released a book called The 50 Worst Films of All Time. This book doesn't feature any of Wood's movies, but the Medved brothers were an essential part of a soon-to-be Ed Wood renaissance. For their next book, the brothers invited a reader's poll for exceptionally bad films, and Plan 9 was a common contender. Harry Medved became very interested in the man behind the movie, and is usually credited with creating the cult of personality around Wood. Shortly after Wood died, Medved tracked down his associates and discovered more about his personal life and work. When the Golden Turkey Awards was released in 1980, the Medveds dubbed Plan 9 the worst movie ever, and Wood was history's worst director. This truly special title really helped to spark the revival. Wood's movies spread to film festivals at home and beyond. College students organized screenings on their campuses. And some movies were released on home video or flat out rescued from being lost from the most unlikely places, like Night of the Ghouls. A fan named Wade William uncovered this gem after paying the film lab that possessed it, because Wood never paid the final processing fees to get it back. A pornographic film, Necromania, was found at a garage sale. Footage from another, Take It Out and Trade, was found in a projection booth in a California movie theater. Articles, books, and documentaries followed, and Wood's films even appeared on Mystery Science Theater 3000. Tim Burton's biopic, released in 1994, was the height of Ed Wood mania, and did a lot to cement the legend of the wide-eyed, angora sweater-wearing hack who refused to compromise or edit his visions. Speaking in 2022, with the hype from that era long gone, does Ed Wood deserve the moniker he got from the Medved brothers all those years ago? I would say no, and that his reputation has improved. Granted, Wood isn't a critically acclaimed household name now, but there are few other cult filmmakers who inspire such devotion. Over the past 40 years, there's been musicals based on his movies, contests, festivals, and films inspired by him, and a religion based around him called the Church of Ed Wood. There are people who have spent countless hours looking for Wood's lost films and projects, including trying to figure out all the pen names he used to write his novels and short stories. There's also been a critical reevaluation of sorts. If you look at modern reviews, they're a lot more forgiving, and rather than poking at Wood's character and lack of budget or skill, highlight why Wood's work is so fun to watch. Although he might not have intended it, his movies are dreamlike and unique, and they have a charm and passion that so many slick, professionally made films lack. After all, His movies will make you laugh, they'll make your head spin, and you'll smile that such wonderful pieces of garbage were ever made in the first place.